officers, the middle school MUN joining us over live stream, Dr. Kush, Dr. Grappla, Habat, founding BERMUN director Frau Hövermann, distinguished delegates, guests, and directors. On behalf of the BERMUN2 team, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 21st annual session of the BERMUN2 conference. My name is Julian Falk, and I have the honor of serving as President of the General Assembly at this year's conference. Seated to my right is Meraki Tadesse, this year's Secretary General. And to my far right and left are Benjamin von Schweinitz and Frieda von Katzenstein, who will be serving as this year's Deputy Secretary Generals. On behalf of all participants, we would like to thank the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for the support of their conference for the past 20 years. We have greatly appreciated the assistance of Dr. Busch Jansa and Herr Felix Bäume. Additionally, we would like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Clemens Brüggemann for his help in making this conference a success. We are grateful that Dr. Kush, the head of the Civic Education Department and head of Educational Management, will address us on behalf of the CAS. Dr. Kush, you now have the floor.
Alles gut, danke schön. Wow, what a lovely picture in front of me. It's really a big, big pleasure, dear participants and executives of this BERMUN 21st edition, protocol observed, to welcome you here at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Congratulations on taking part in the 2026 Berlin Model United Nations Conference. I'm delighted, as I said already, to see so many young people, committed young people in this forum, which is not always as crowded as it is today, and especially not with young people. So this is a very, very good situation for us as well here in the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. It is a great pleasure for us to host you with this conference at our academy, a place that actually serves as a forum for dialogue between politics, business, science, and society. This conference has a long and impressive history, as it was already mentioned. The Berlin Model United Nations Conference has now taken place more than 20 times. Which a legacy. Thanks to one lady sitting here who put the rolling of the stone into place. Thank you very much, madam, for doing that. Bringing together generations of young committed minds to engage with global challenges and to develop thoughtful and innovative solutions, that's the very purpose of today. For over 2 decades, BERMUN has thrived on the dedication of students like you, young people who look beyond their own interests and invest their time and energy in making our society and the international community a better place. You can really be proud of that. It is a privilege to address you today because your engagement closely reflects the mission statements and the values of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which is shaping democracy together. Through our work, we contribute towards securing and increasing peace, freedom, and prosperity in Europe and throughout the world. Through our dedicated work, we strengthen the democratic and constitutional forces and institutions in Germany, in Europe, and around the globe, with more than 100 offices. We motivate, we provide qualifications, we grant scholarships, and activate younger generations with respect to democracy issues. Shaping democracy together, that is not only our mission statement, it is our mission for the next 3 days as well. Democracy cannot function without engaged people who actively carry forward this spirit. And it's exactly what will matter to you at the upcoming conference. Model United Nations conferences are much more than academic exercise. They are spaces where young people engage seriously with global challenges, learn to understand different perspectives, and practice respectful debate. At a time when international cooperation is under pressure in many parts of the world, these skills are of importance more than ever. As participants at the BERMUN conference, you will have the unique chance to experience the dynamics of multinational and multilateral negotiations firsthand. This is an exceptional opportunity, I'd say, that will not only give you a deeper understanding of the complexity of international relations, it will also allow you to meet and learn from peers who share your interest in the pressing questions of our time. My two kids, now 24 and 26, they were students at the Nelson Mandela School, and they also participated in these conferences. And I think it was a game changer for them, because every time they came back, and they participated twice, they had new ideas and new arguments. And we as parents, we always struggled, in countering or arguing against them. So it really, it was a seed that was, put into them during this event. In recent years, we have observed that in certain policy areas and social debates, the space for open discussion has become narrow. Positions are sometimes reduced to clear sides, and disagreement is too easily interpreted as hostility. This can lead to exclusion, not only of opinions, but also of people. And it risks undermining the very democratic culture that thrives on respectful debate, pluralism, and the willingness to listen to one another. Dear participants, with these considerations in mind, I would like to turn to the theme of this year's conference, Decolonize. The term actually invites us to reflect on history, global inequalities, and how past injustices continue to shape the present. Addressing such questions means taking history seriously, listening to different experiences, and recognizing the dignity of each and every human being. At the same time, it also means resisting intellectual simplifications and approaching complex issues with care, curiosity, and a willingness to learn, rather than assuming that there's only one correct perspective. Our stance as Konrad Adenauer Stiftung on discourses of post-colonialism and decolonialism becomes clear in our recent publications. In today's world, the idea of reaching consensus among countries so different in history, culture, and perspectives seems increasingly idealistic, but the idea of shared democratic values is not outdated. Throughout your deliberations, you will weigh your own values against positions that may differ significantly from your own. You will face the challenge of remaining faithful to the principles all United Nations member states have agreed upon. I encourage you to take this role seriously, but also to see it as an opportunity to listen carefully, to argue respectfully, and to remain open to compromise. This conference is a perfect example on how people from different backgrounds can tackle issues together. BERMUN is a space where ideas flourish, where dialogue bridges differences between people and perspectives, and where a better future becomes feasible. This conference is a reminder to all of us that every effort must be made to fight inequality in a step forward for a better world. Your voices matter, and your actions can bring the changes we need. We must keep in mind that regardless of which global challenge we are addressing, it will be impossible for one country to face on its own. In joining the conference, you are preparing yourself for the role you will assume in the very near future. I'm sure The next 3 days will have an important impact on your views of the world and hopefully on the rest of your lives as it has for my kids. And now I wish you lively debates, lots of interesting insights, but above all, of course, lots of fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Knirsch, for your kind welcome and for speaking on the impact of BERMUN and its connection to the work of the CAS. We appreciate your support of our program, especially in challenging times. We value your remarks and once again extend our thanks to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for their continuous support.
We are also thankful for the support of the John F. Kennedy School. Our binational school represents the long history of the transatlantic partnership between Germany and the United States. This relationship is currently under fire, yet our school remains determined to make this partnership work. We are pleased to have our school's managing director and German high school principal, Herr Robert Bartz, join us today. Herr Robert Bartz teaches math and has been a dedicated member of our school for 4 years. Herr Bartz, you now have the floor.
Dear Secretariat, dear Dr. Knirsch, dear Dr. Grappla, dear teachers, student officers, and students visiting across Europe and as far away as Rwanda. As the managing director of the John F. Kennedy School, it is my great privilege to welcome you to the 21st BERMUN2 conference. This conference is the result of a long-standing partnership with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, which has generously supported us with a facility, catering, and invaluable collaboration. The John F. Kennedy School is a public school in Berlin committed to fostering the transatlantic partnership between Germans and Americans, especially in challenging times. Much like the United Nations, JFKS believes that peace and security are more likely to flourish through bicultural and international understanding and mutual respect. Therefore, our students learn at least English and German. Moreover, many of our students participate in Model of United Nations simulations to deepen their understanding of global perspectives. For some of you, many from Germany, this is your first Model United Nations conference and German is your mother tongue. Others among you speak French, Dutch, or other language. I encourage each of you not only to listen carefully to your fellow participants, but also to speak confidently and actively during the proceedings of the coming days. The theme we'll be addressing is Decolonize. This is a serious and complex topic that requires thoughtful consideration as we reflect on how to move forward. Formerly colonized people have had diverse voices and widely differing experiences. Like each of you, their voices deserve to be heard, such as tomorrow, when you will have the opportunity to listen to the Namibian ambassador to Germany, His Excellency Jerobim Shanika. I hope that through your discussions and debates, you will gain a deeper understanding of the many diverse international perspectives surrounding this sobering and important theme. Over the years, I have learned that history is not just something that lies behind us. It shapes the opportunities we have, the inequalities we see, and the responsibilities we carry today. When we speak about decolonization, we are not only discussing events from textbooks. We are talking about people's identities, cultures, languages, and lived experiences, some marked by injustice, others by resilience and strength. What gives me hope is you. You represent a generation that is more connected, more informed, and often more courageous in addressing difficult truths than any other generation before. You are willing to ask uncomfortable questions. You are willing to challenge established narratives. And most importantly, you are willing to listen to one another, across borders and backgrounds. Model United Nations is not just a simulation. It is a space where you practice leadership. Here you learn that diplomacy is not about winning an argument. It is about building understanding. It is about recognizing that progress rarely comes from speaking the loudest, but from listening the most carefully. As you debate over the coming days, I encourage you to be curious, to be respectful, to be brave. Brave enough to rethink assumptions, brave enough to compromise, and have enough to imagine a future that is fairer than the past. In closing, on behalf of the John F. Kennedy School, I would like to wish you great success over the next few days. I encourage you to seek global compromises, solutions that are more meaningful and necessary than simply delivering impressive speeches. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Habat, for your encouraging words and elaborating on the relationship between Germany and the United States and what role it plays in fostering diplomacy.
At this time, we would like to thank JFK student Evelyn Fogel. She has worked hard to realize our conference theme in this year's artwork. Evelyn drew an image showing how the problems of historic colonialism have spread and changed into the modern era. Evelyn, we appreciate the hard work for the art that you created. Let us give a round of applause to Evelyn.
Over the next 2 days, we will be debating several topics related to our conference theme, Decolonize. Therefore, we would like to invite Benjamin von Schweinitz, one of this year's Deputy Secretary Generals, to take the floor to elaborate on the connection between the committee topics and our conference theme. Benjamin has been a dedicated member of the BERMUN team for nearly 3 years. His impressive work ethic and precision to detail has kept us all on our toes. His horrible dad jokes are so bad, they always made us smile, even through long nights of preparation. Mr. Deputy Secretary General, the floor is yours.
History does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Mark Twain's words feel prophetic today. But what is the rhyme scheme of colonialism? The answer is threefold: extraction, control, and division. First, extraction. Colonial powers promised development and modernization. The problem? The railroads only ran from the mines to the ports. The infrastructure was designed not to connect communities, but to extract wealth, an issue ECOSOC will discuss. Resource theft isn't history, though. It's an ongoing issue perpetrated by new actors that will be addressed by MSMUN. Second, control. Colonizers forced their arbitrary will upon the colonies without their consent. the HSC will be examining the Suez Canal crisis, a 1956 conflict sparked by Egyptian nationalization of the canal, which led to a military intervention by Britain, France, and Israel. The Security Council will address Haiti's situation, which is a result of its independence being undermined by a debt paid to France for over a century. Third, division. Colonizers forced their culture, language, and religion upon their colonies. They fractured communities with their divide and conquer tactics, topical to SOCOM and the ICJ. Confronting the rhyme scheme of extraction, control, and division means taking on post-colonial responsibility, as GA4 will do. If colonialism has a rhyme scheme, then so must justice. We cannot let extraction, control, and division be the final verse. It is our turn to rewrite the pattern, to replace extraction with equity, control with sovereignty, division with solidarity. This is not about revisiting the past. It is about reshaping the future. So let this conference be more than a discussion. Let it be disruption. Let it be accountability. Let it be action. It is time to break the rhyme. It is time to decolonize our systems, to decolonize our institutions, to decolonize our thinking. Because history may rhyme, but this generation chooses how the next stanza is written. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin, for highlighting the committee topic's connection to the overall theme and for elaborating on the pillars of colonialism.
We will now turn our attention to our Solomon Iro keynote address. In 2019, Solomon Iro joined the MUN program as a smiling 8th grader. He first participated as a delegate and then as a student officer. Then, Solomon became the BERMUN2 Deputy Secretary General, and in November 2023, the BERMUN Secretary General. Just before he graduated with his Abitur, he was diagnosed with cancer. He passed months later in December of 2024. Although there is a deep sadness, we remember Solomon today not only because he passed away, but because he lived. And we remember him today because of how he lived and for his contributions to the BERMUN program. In honor of him, we now introduce this year's Solomon Iro keynote speaker, Dr. Grappla. She is a scholar and researcher at the Institute of International Peace and Security Law for the University of Cologne. Her PhD focuses on the restitution of artifacts appropriated during the colonial period in the 19th and 20th centuries. Thank you, Dr. Grappla, for taking time out of your schedule to address the forum today. You now have the floor.
Africa's memory. I ask for Olu Yen Yetuye, bronze of Ife. The moon says it is in Bonn. I ask for Ogiktidik Bongying, mask of Benin. The moon says it is in London. I ask for Dinko Vavastul of Ashanti. The moon says it is in Paris. I ask for Togongoreva, bust of Zimbabwe. The moon says it is in New York. I ask for the memory of Africa. The seasons say it is blowing in the wind. The hunchback cannot hide his burden. Dear Secretary General Maraki Tadassi, dear Deputy Secretary General Frieda Kastenstein and Benjamin von Schweinitz, dear President of the General Assembly, Julian Volk, dear dedicated teacher and seamless planners, and most importantly, dear esteemed senior and junior delegates. It is my great privilege to open this year's conference and extend a warm welcome to all of you. Decolonization, the word is thrown around constantly, yet its meaning remains frustrating and unclear. The Secretariat has written on this year's BERMUN website. While post-independent states gained agency on the international floor, colonial structures adapted rather than disappeared. When I read the text, I thought, you are already the experts here. What else can I tell you? But at the end of the text, you raised the question, moving forward, what does decolonization entail? That was the point at which I began to hope that I could still contribute a small example. To better understand decolonization, let us first have a look at colonization. So let us travel back in time and let us stop in 1899, the heyday of German colonialism. Allow me to report on an event in what is now called Cameroon. In the year 1899, the German salesman Gustav Conrau, based in Douala, traveled to the upper grasslands in Cameroon, where he traded with the Bangba king. For what we know, sometimes in good faith and sometimes in bad faith. He sold plenty of cultural goods from the Bangba to the Royal Museum in Berlin, today's Humboldt Forum. And they are still there. One day, he also asked Bangba for Asungani for plantation workers. Asungani had already been involved in the trading of men before and provided him with 60 workers. But contrary to what was agreed, they never came home back alive. After a dispute between Asungani and Conrau, Conrau got arrested. He was able to escape, but died on his flight. The pipe-smoking lay femme you can see in the picture, however, was still at its original place. German troops, ironically called Schutztruppen, protecting groups, were sent to take revenge. In the years 1900 to 1902, 4 so-called punitive expeditions took place. Lieutenant Kurt Strümpel and his troops were sent to bring adequate compensation. Accordingly, shortly before the first attack, Felix von Luchan, the later director of the Royal Museum and Conrau's contact person in Berlin, wrote, "In the event that a punitive expedition were to be undertaken, the Royal Museum would be very keen to ensure that the house of the Fonds would not burn down. It would be highly commendable if the king's large signal and dance drums, as well as any other carvings, fetishes, etc., in his possession, were not destroyed, but rather sent in." But in the year 1901, in the Upper Cameroon grasslands, Hauptmann Bernhard von Besser and Lieutenant Kurt Strümpel decided otherwise. The village of Fontem was burned down. The expedition could not think about taking even the smallest rarity because no bearers whatsoever were available. Only with great difficulty could the most essential loads and the wounded be transported. However, not everything was burned down during the expedition. Kurt Strümpel took a wooden sculpture, a pipe-smoking les femmes, during the expedition. It ended up being in Cologne. Collection number 48,796. Now let us travel back to the future, step by step. Why is the lay femme still in Cologne? And what do the steps tell us about the process of decolonization? A brief step to 1919. After World War I, the German Empire lost all of its colonies. So what happened normally to looted objects after a military victory in the 19th century? Well, after Germany's victory over France, the quadriga, which Napoleon had captured in 1806, returned triumphantly to Berlin in 1814. After the Congress of Vienna in 1815, there were significant restitutions of looted objects. And also in the Treaty of Versailles, significant restitutions were decided. On the one hand, restitutions were being made due to the powerful position of the victorious belligerent. On the other hand, however, it was also due to the idea of a prohibition norm that had already been emerged in the 19th century. However, Cameroon did not emerge as a powerful victor in 1919. The man you can see here in the picture decided that the region around Douala should become part of the French protectorate. And what about the ban on looting? The Germans actually had strict laws against looting, as they themselves had had cultural assets stolen by the French in the previous years. This was the case with the Quadriga and the Brandenburger Tor. However, neither was a military criminal law enforced, a law that Wilhelm II expressly ordered to be applicable for African protecting troops, as you can see here in this document, nor was local law considered authoritative. And even international law was not declared to be applicable, because it was only applicable among sovereign, civilized states. African entities could not become parties to international treaties on warfare. Instead, an exceptional regime was created for so-called uncivilized peoples. So why was Ilefem not returned in 1919? Well, Cameroon gained independence from Germany, but did not attain a position of power. And the European states did not allow themselves to be judged by their own standards vis-à-vis uncivilized nations. Second step. Let us travel 40 years forward. In 1960, Cameroon finally gained independence, and Cameroon joined the United Nations together with 17 other states in the same year. It was now a sovereign state among equals. And as such a state, it finally wanted to make use of the mechanisms of international law. Here you can see Charles Okala in a Western-style suit and tie. The newly independent states urged for a true post-colonial world order, and their influence could hardly have been overseen. African states tabled a freshly new resolution in the Third Committee of the General Assembly. The resolution, Restitution of Works of Art to Countries Victims of Expropriation, was born. Because it is an impressive and often forgotten document, let us have a further look at the original text. Already in 1973, the General Assembly affirmed that the prompt restitution to a country of its objets d'art, monuments, museum pieces, manuscripts, and documents by another country without charge is calculated to strengthen international cooperation as much as it constitutes just reparation for damage done. It recognized the special obligations in this context of those countries which had access to such valuable only as a result of colonial or foreign occupation. And the commitment of the new independent states was not limited to this resolution. In 1978, the newly independent states also pushed for the creation of a restitution committee, the so-called Intergovernmental Committee for Promoting the Return of Cultural Property to its countries of origin or its restitution in case of illicit appropriation, was founded and attached to UNESCO. So why have the objects not been returned even in this post-conflict phase? In short, because the current possessors did not accept to do so. The Europeans acted cleverly. While 113 countries voted in favor of the resolution, the European states abstained. even linguistic concessions during the early years could not change it. Instead of the term victims of expropriation, which was included in the first resolution, 6 years later, the claimants were referred to only as countries of origin that attach great importance to return of cultural property. But still, European states abstained. In the funding documents of the Return and Restitution Committee, it had been watered down to such an extent that there was no longer any basis for its actual purpose. There was to be no binding mechanism for appropriations made prior to the creation of the committee. The committee was never really brought to life until today. You can find a corresponding disclaimer on the first page of the committee's website. While cultural heritage rights were significantly strengthened during this period, African states did not achieve their goal. What is more, thanks to additional protection against export, the objects were safer in Europe than ever before. Within a few years, the former European colonial powers had thus removed the asserted claim to return and restitution from the historical context of violent appropriation. European countries were thus able to portray themselves as protectors of cultural property in two ways. Firstly, by now promoting cultural property rights. Secondly, by repeatedly emphasizing how well the objects, the common heritage, was preserved in Europe. No decision has been made about the past, and of course, they could have decided otherwise. This decolonization phase could only be perceived as disillusioning. Upcoming civil wars during the Cold War period contributed to the fact that the momentum of these years could not be maintained. In the upcoming decades, one could soberly conclude that the attempt to claim a right to return translocated objects during colonial times had failed. Third step. Now let us travel to the present days. In 2015, the African Union initiated the establishment of a great African museum as part of their Agenda 2063 to preserve African cultural heritage and promote Pan-Africanism. In 2017, French President Emmanuel Macron gave his famous speech at the University of Ouagadougou, in which he said he wanted to create the conditions for restitution within the next 5 years. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated in his report to the General Assembly in 2021, the issue of the return and restitution of cultural property has gained unprecedented visibility. After 50 years of defeating silence, the above-mentioned resolution contains operative clauses that take the origin of the resolution seriously. Also, state practice is leaning toward a change. Significant objects were returned during the last years. To name but a few, Hendrik Witbois' whip and Bible were given from Germany to Namibia. The sabre of El Hadj Omar Tall from France to Senegal. The golden dagger of Prince Dupo Negoro from the Netherlands to Indonesia. And the ownership of 1,130 so-called Benin bronzes was transferred from Germany to Nigeria. And what is also new is that governments are explicitly referring to past injustices. So can we now rejoice and finally speak of a decolonial phase? Of a new restitution practice based on state practice and legal conviction? I doubt it. Not only are the archives still full of important objects, but the legal counsel of the most important Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation here in Germany, Carola Thieleke, states, can be assumed that appropriations by public authorities were always covered by the formal colonial law applicable at that time. So it is still a long way from mentioning injustice to recognizing an epistemic and legal injustice. European countries are thus once again acting quite cleverly by emphasizing that they are giving back out of moral conviction due to past injustice. They are once again positioning themselves on the side of moral superiority. And what does this specific history tell us about decolonization in post-colonial periods? Not only was appropriation based on a practice of othering, but also was the non-restitution in 1919, in 1960, and even today. The colonial relationship has thus been perpetuated over and over again. Indeed, colonial structures adapted rather than disappeared. Coming back to our initial question, moving forward, what does decolonization entail? It entails the return of the objects that have been acquired militarily. Not because everything from Cameroon must be returned to Cameroon, not because world cultural heritage could not also be preserved elsewhere, not only because of moral reasons, but because they were acquired and kept unlawfully. More than once, the door was wide open for European states to adhere to their own principles. Not least for the sake of their own credibility, these states would do well to come to terms with their own past. At a time when universalism and international law are once again under pressure, it's the hunchback's decision to face its burden. Thank you.
Delegates and chairs, you now have the time to ask questions to Dr. Grappla. Once called on, please use the microphone in front of you. If you do not have a microphone, please wait for a member of the administrative staff to bring you one. Are there any questions in the House? We will start with Giselle and then move on to Benjamin.
Yeah. Okay, so I am the ICJ. I'm actually talking about a case between Cameroon and Nigeria. And I wanted to ask you what you believe the responsibilities of countries such as Germany, France, or the UK should be, specifically related to conflicts that they have caused due to, for example, dividing of them.
It's a good question. I hope you will find the answer in the upcoming days. If I had to answer spontaneously, well, I tend to say their responsibility is to give the floor to the countries you have mentioned, to Cameroon and Nigeria, and let them speak and listen. And if those states say they need support in any kind, then it would be the point when the European states would come into play. And since I'm also European, I would say I'd rather take a step back. Maybe it's not a sophisticated answer, but.
Saying that I'm fully in favor of all restitution and repatriation of cultural objects. But I recently read about a term called, I think it was cultural internationalism, or something like that, where countries or institutions claim objects to, instead of being of a certain provenance, rather being a global object for the education and research of the masses. First, I'd like to ask, has this been a strategy historically from European nations? And second of all, how successful was this strategy? Because often the provenance of these objects is somewhat debatable depending on cultural changes and border changes.
Sorry for the interruption. We have some online guests and the middle school MUN watching via live stream. They can't hear the questions. I will just repeat the question so everyone can hear. The question was, how can, or while Benjamin is in favor of restitution, how cultural internationalism could be a different attempt to find a solution for the question of restitution, and to what extent it has been successful and whether it's applied by the UN.
Thank you for the question. Well, yeah, I think it was quite a strategy of the European states, firstly, to say, isn't it a global common heritage? And is it not better to keep them here where we have like the best technique to preserve it? Well, first, for example, in Cologne, what happened is that we have the archives quite close to the Rhine, to the river, and it got flooded. So I don't know if the argument is quite true. But even then, even if it is a European strategy, I guess we have to think about if it does make it a wrong one. And I think yes, it is a common heritage. But does it speak against restitution? I doubt it. But what we have to, or what I have to admit is that, or I would say, heritage from Cameroon or heritage from Germany or from anywhere else does not have to be in this specific country. How we call it in the debate is cultural essentialism. I don't want to send German stuff to Germany and Cameroon stuff to Cameroon and Cameroon people to Cameroon and Germans to Germany, because it's quite nice to have open borders and cultural exchange. But when we know that there is a legal divide or a legal claim, then yes, we have to give the objects back to the claimants. And we cannot deny it only because of some sort of internationalism.
We will now again be opening up the questions to the forum. Are there any questions? Wow, okay. We will be taking these questions from the delegation of Haiti, delegation of Haiti, Iran, I believe we have Dominican Republic and Nigeria for now.
Sorry. So as Haiti, obviously France forced our country to pay lots of financial costs. And do you think the responsibility of previously colonial countries is a financial responsibility as well to ensure that decolonization is fully happening in these places?
What does Haiti think about it?
Haiti thinks that there definitely should be financial help for our country.
It's also a quite difficult question, and I hope to maybe I can learn from Haiti in this case. The question that arises is that the one on how many years we go back. I think yes, if there was damage done by another country, they have to pay restitution. They have to pay what But then, I mean, when does the list end? If we go back to the Second World War, we can make a list, and we can go back to the First World War, we can make a list, and we can go back to colonial times and make a list of damages. And I think at some point we have to sit together and try to, let's say, sign a treaty and have a look in the future. And at that point we have to have we have to speak on the same level. If there is still, if it's not the same level speaking, then the contract might be void. But if Haiti and France sit together and make a contract on the past, that might be the best solution to compensate.
Addressing post-colonial ethnic divides. So my question would be, especially looking at, for example, ethnic groups or tribes living across and between different countries, how much of the work return certain artifacts is being done with tribes or ethnic groups instead of actual countries, and how important do you consider that?
It's also a good question, and it connects to a previous one. It's a problem in international law that, well, at least traditionally we see only states as the sovereigns in public debates or international law debates. So most of the time, at least European states tend to say it's the country's task to speak with the tribes within the country. And in some cases it works quite well. In New Zealand, I know, or Australia also, I know that the government is working more or less closely with some committees with the tribes. So when, for example, Germany is giving back objects to Australia or New Zealand, one can be more or less sure that they end up being in the tribe's possession. Now, in the case of Namibia, it's quite difficult, because you know that the government is not working closely with the tribes you have in Namibia. So it's quite a difficult question for European states how to behave. Should they either connect with the government, what is the more classic version, or should they directly interact with the tribes in Namibia, for example? I don't have a solution for the problem, but I guess they at least in the case of Namibia, it's quite a big issue, quite a big issue, and maybe it's a reason to hesitate to give some objects back if the original possessors are not to be included. On the other side, I know in Nigeria, maybe you have read about it, when Germany gave back the Benin bronzes to Nigeria, the Nigerian government decided to give it back to the original possessors. And that was quite a big issue in Germany, because they said, well, then it's not open to the public anymore, because the government gave it back to the actual king, and he put some of the Benin bronzes in his palace. It's a weird debate, because I mean, I don't know if anybody has already asked King Charles to make the whole palace and all the stuff open to the public. Again, I don't have a good answer. I can just repeat that it's quite complicated, but they should be included anyway. And maybe, in a way, minority rights could be enforced, or minorities could be more empowered in the national fora.
How willingly would European nations give back objects that they bought back them somehow? And what do you think about that?
Could you repeat the first part?
How willingly would European nations give back objects that they somehow bought back them? And what do you think about that? And yeah.
well, if they bought them, they could keep them. If I know that there are some claims to give back all the objects. Doesn't matter out of which context they come. And what one could easily say that because colonialism was a context of injustice, even the bought objects were to be given back. I think it would be a better option to say give back what you have unlawfully taken and keep what you have, for example, bought, if the contract is not void because of military pressure or something like this. Why do I say it? I think because when you buy something, you make a contract between two equals. And by recognizing the other one as equal, you do what decolonialism wants to know. So if you can prove that the contract was okay, without pressure, then we might have good reasons to keep the object here.
So, as the delegate of Nigeria, we have obviously been very much affected by this topic. So we were just wondering about any experience you have personally made on this topic, for example, from your work, if you could just expand on that.
Well, my only personal experience is due to my research. Actually, I have never talked to the countries of origin. What I focus on is, as a German, on the German perspective. And one could easily say, isn't it already in its foundation a wrong perspective? But because the German foundation argues that even the German colonial law applicable at the time said that it was legal to take the objects, I took the chance to say that at least this sentence is not true. So I try to focus on what I can do from my German perspective and say about German laws from the 19th and 20th century. And maybe in the next step I should travel more to African countries to listen.
Thank you, Dr. Luban Grappla, for giving us a historical background about colonialism and educating us about the different cultural heritages that have been affected through the process. Your words on the steps that are needed to move forward with decolonization have hopefully given an alternative perspective to the theme and will prove helpful to our delegates. We appreciate you for taking the time to address our conference today, as well as for reading our secretariat letter. We ask that you accept this token of our gratitude.
The BERMUN press team has prepared an opening video for the conference. Please direct your attention to the screen.
And the legacies of that past still shape our languages, our institutions, and our public spaces. And sometimes that history is written right into the city.
Behind me is the U-Bahn station Anton Wilhelm Aro Straße. Until recently, it had a colonial era name that used a derogatory term for people of African descent. After years of activism by Decolonize Berlin, The station was renamed to honor 18th century African-German philosopher Anton Wilhelm Amo. This is decolonization in real time.
So, is decolonization already over, or is it still unfinished?
There really isn't a clear answer to your question, Meraki. Political independence created something we call agency, but it didn't dismantle the global political and economic systems that were inherited from colonial rule.
What do you mean by agency?
Well, post-colonial states do make real decisions. They form governments, they negotiate treaties, and they enact policies. Many scholars wish to emphasize this agency in order to refrain from treating colonial history as an all-encompassing explanation for current outcomes today.
So, this raises the question, what are we decolonizing?
That is precisely what we want you, as delegates, to debate. Some scholars argue decolonization focuses primarily on material structures, including unequal trade systems, debt dependency, and patterns of resource extraction that continue to profit foreign corporations while leaving local communities impoverished.
But exploitation still exists.
Yes, indeed it does. Foreign corporations and powerful states continue to profit from these structures, especially in less economically developed countries, even though local governments exercise agency.
So where does that leave us?
It leaves us with a central question. How do we take agency seriously while also acknowledging the global inequalities and external exploitation that continue to shape outcomes today?
And that, delegates, is what we want you to discuss in your committees.
Thank you, Marie, Iona, Nina, Ella, and Austin for giving us such an enthusiastic and informative start to our conference. The video will surely inspire our discussions on how we can decolonize.
Next, it is my pleasure to introduce this year's Secretary General, Meraki Tadessa. Meraki has been part of the program for nearly 2 years and is one of the program's most passionate members. Her organizational skills were imperative to keeping us on track in preparing for the conference, and her upbeat mood was greatly appreciated in our long meetings. Madam Secretary General, you now have the floor.
The Earth is flat. This was an idea believed by people for centuries, not because they lacked the ability to question it, but because it reflected the limits of what they could see and what they had always known. Their understanding of the world was shaped by perspective. But when a limited perspective becomes accepted truth, it does more than describe reality. It shapes it. It determines who governs, who is heard, and whose voice is dismissed. Colonialism functioned in a similar way. Systems of rule were justified not only through force, but through a worldview that presented domination as natural, necessary, and even inevitable. Across continents, empires drew borders without the consent of the people, sketching the world according to power rather than choice. These borders were enforced through conquest, administration, and the restructuring of societies to serve external interests. The world as we know it today was largely mapped by conquerors, not by its people. Since 1945, the United Nations has sought to return the pen to the people, allowing them to determine their own borders and their own futures. So, this raises the central question. To what extent has the UN's efforts to decolonize been successful? At its founding, nearly 1/3 of humanity lived under colonial rule, a whopping 750 million people. Today, that number has dramatically declined by approximately and have declined to approximately 2 million people. On paper, this transformation appears profound. Yet, decolonization was never only about granting independence. It was about returning control. Newly independent states were given keys to a vehicle built for someone else's journey, a state whose institutions were designed to extract wealth rather than distribute opportunity. They could repaint the exterior, they could change the drivers, but the engine, the structure of governance and economy, was not built to serve them. At independence, many nations were told the vehicle was now theirs. Their flags had changed, their leadership had changed, but the engine, the structure of governance, remained locked to an external fuel system. Political control had ended, economic control had not. If decolonization is measured by sovereignty, success appears clear. If it is measured by political autonomy, the answer becomes more complex. Formal empires receded, yet systems of economic dependency often remained embedded in national structures. One of the clearest examples can be seen in monetary arrangements that persisted after independence in Africa. Countries such as Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire continued using a shared currency framework originally established during colonial administration. Under this arrangement, monetary policy remained tied to external guarantees and oversight, limiting domestic control over exchange rates, reserves, and financial strategy. This system offered stability, but the stability came with constraint. Decisions affecting investment capacity, credit conditions, and fiscal flexibility shaped those national borders. External pressures deepened these vulnerabilities. During the Cold War, the newly independent states became arenas of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Even as nations tried to repair the engine, outside powers repeatedly reached under the hood, replacing parts to suit their own direction of travel. In response, the United Nations expanded its mission beyond granting independence. It expanded to supporting governance, elections, and institution building. These efforts helped stabilize fragile systems, and they created opportunities for institutional reconstruction. Yet, these efforts were often reactive rather than preventative. They addressed crises after instability had already taken root. They were limited by political divisions and resource constraints within the organization itself. Elsewhere, the path to self-determination was longer. Namibia achieved full sovereignty only in 1990, after decades of external administration and international supervision. Timor-Leste gained recognized sovereignty in 2002, following occupation and a UN-administered transition. These histories remind us that redrawing borders is not the same as achieving structural independence. Meanwhile, African nations disagree with moral lectures from the US and European allies about democracy and human rights, with many preferring to deal with China or Russia, which don't make similar moral demands but often require far higher economic and political returns. The vehicle had changed drivers, but the direction they were going was still partially controlled from the outside. However, some nations began the long process of redesigning their institutions. In Morocco, independence did not immediately dismantle colonial economic structures. Over time, national development strategies increasingly focused on domestic industrial capacity and energy independence. Major renewable energy investments reduced reliance on external energy control, strengthening economic sovereignty. Institutional reforms expanded national policy capacity and long-term planning authority. Morocco demonstrates that decolonization can take the form of gradual institutional design, rebuilding the engine so that development is determined internally rather than imposed externally. A different path can be observed in Botswana. At independence in 1966, Botswana inherited minimal infrastructure and institutions not designed for self-rule. Rather than allowing external factors to dominate its resource economy, Botswana maintained strong public control over diamond revenues and directed them into education, healthcare, and even institutional capacity. Over the decades, this strategy produced sustainable economic growth and political stability. Botswana shows that when a nation reconstructs its economic engine to serve its citizens, sovereignty becomes functional rather than symbolic. These examples do not represent complete decolonization. They demonstrate that structural transformation is possible when nations gain meaningful control over economic and institutional design. So, in conclusion, has the mission to decolonize been successful? If success is defined by the end of a formal empire, the achievement is historic. But if success is defined by political and economic autonomy, the process remains incomplete. Decolonization cannot be measured only by flags or borders. It must also be measured by who controls resources, who designs institutions, and whose interests guide development. It rests on states willing to reform global systems, on leaders willing to prioritize economic sovereignty over dependency, and it relies on international cooperation that strengthens autonomy rather than replaces it. Because independence was never the destination, it was the beginning. Decolonization was not only about who sits in the driver's seat, but it was about who designs the vehicle itself. And until that power is reclaimed, sovereignty remains symbolic. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General, for your remarks on the UN's efforts to successfully decolonize. Please accept this token of our appreciation.
For the past few months, it has been our pleasure to work with this year's team of student officers. Their contributions in each committee in terms of insight, character, and leadership enrich all of our conference experiences. We will now introduce the student officers of BERMUN2 2026 by their respective committees. When they are called, please join us in giving them a well-deserved round of applause. Student officers, please stand when your name is called.
The chairs of the middle school MUN who are joining us over the live streams are James Somanovitz, Nova Amundsen, and David Beller. Please let them hear your applause in the Jakob Kaisazai from here.
The presidents of the Security Council are Keo Kasper, Benjamin Masseri, and Lara Luhrmann.
The presidents of the Historical Security Council are Benno Thomas, Ilian Baudet, and Leah Hulsenbeck.
The presidents of the International Court of Justice are Karma Zilberqueit and Maxime Schnabel.
The presidents of the Economic and Social Council are Hamilton Turner, Frida Tischbier, and Marina Leitner.
The chairs of the Special Political and Decolonization Committee are Clemens Schmidt, Arika Moss, and Jonathan Lugani.
The chairs of the Social, Humanitarian, and Cultural Committee are Susanna Skinner, Matas Möbius, and Barry Tabachnikov.
At this time, we would also like to acknowledge the heads of administrative staff, Nomi Tucker and Lindy Suyak.
Additionally, we would like to recognize our press co-editors-in-chiefs, Zoe Lehmann and Nola Hiller. These student officers have proven to be an enthusiastic and resourceful team. Their hard work and commitment will make this year's conference an especially unforgettable event.
At this time, it is my distinct honor to declare the 21st Annual BERMUN2 Conference as officially open. Distinguished ambassadors, you will now address the forum and weigh in on the conference theme. We will be calling on 6 speakers at a time. Please hold your applause until all 6 speeches are finished. After these speeches, we will be accepting rights of reply. A right of reply is a rhetorical question to one of the speakers which will not be answered. We ask that you keep your rights of reply clear and concise. If you are called on for a right of reply, please use the microphone in front of you by pressing the button. The first ambassador will be randomly selected by Frau Hövermann, the founding BERMUN director. After that, we will be calling on speakers alphabetically. Ambassadors, if your name is called, please approach the podium in the order that you have been called. Once again, please hold your applause until all 6 speeches are finished. Frau Hövermann? China. Ambassador of China, please approach the podium. Following alphabetically, we will be hearing from the ambassadors of Dominican Republic, followed by France, followed by Germany, followed by Greece, followed by Haiti. Please come to the right side of the podium.
After you have held your opening speech, please wait until all other speakers have finished their speeches before returning to your seat. Please also remember that speeches should not be longer than 1 minute. After 1 minute has passed, we will hit the gavel to remind you to come to your closing remarks. Please give every ambassador the respect that they deserve and listen attentively. Ambassador of China, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Secretariat, fellow delegates, and esteemed guests. Decolonize. Reclaim sovereignty. Thrive. For China, decolonization is an ongoing global responsibility that should not be ignored. Instead, colonial past should drive reflection, not for the pursuit of selfish interests. Unfortunately, aggressive power politics are still exercised by few countries that persist in infringing on sovereignty. We must eradicate colonial legacy through recognizing state autonomy over inflicted colonial ideology. Decolonization is key in upholding the United Nations principle of sovereign equality. We see a rise in wars of aggression in an attempt to impose political models often seen as means of exploitation and coercion. To escape unilateral and colonial interference in international affairs, we urge member states to promote the right of self-determination and economic development as means of liberation. We must adhere to sovereign equality and promote greater fairness in international relations. We urge member states to regard colonialism not as a mere chapter in history. So join us in putting an end to modern-day colonialism.
Every year, in August and September, hurricanes hit the Dominican Republic, causing casualties and hundreds of millions of dollars in destruction. These cyclones are being exacerbated by climate change, a consequence of colonization. The DR was at some point in its history colonized by France, Spain, and the United States. The IMF is a product of this colonization that many of the countries here face today. As such, it is time for a major reform of these financial systems, starting with providing debt relief to developing countries. Our second demand is support for these countries in developing sustainable electricity infrastructure to reduce their reliance on colonial powers. And thirdly, we demand member states' investments in the Loss and Damages Fund to help vulnerable countries face climate disasters such as the hurricanes that devastate the Caribbean. We think of colonialism as a thing of the past, but it is here today, keeping us poor while rich, polluting countries profit. Thank you.
Honorable chairs, fellow delegates, we do acknowledge our colonial past that is complicated and continues to shape the global relationships today. Moving forward, France believes decolonization must be not just symbolic, but visible by real action. Our strategy focuses on two essential priorities, which are economic fairness and political independence. First, France supports creating fairer trade partnerships so former colonies are not trapped in debt or resource dependency. This includes encouraging local industries and investing in education and job training to help nations build strong, self-sustaining economies. Second, France emphasizes strengthening political independence by supporting transparent governance, fair elections, and stronger representation for developing nations within international institutions. By building fair and equal partnerships instead of unequal systems, we can transform historical responsibility into shared progress. Thank you.
Honourable Secretariat, distinguished guests, fellow delegates. For many countries, decolonization is not just a page in history. It is a reality that still shapes so many things in our world today. The delegation of Germany believes that the decolonization is a shared global responsibility. It is not just about rewriting the past, it is about taking responsibility for it. As a member of the United Nations and the EU, we recognize that the effects of colonialism did not simply disappear when independence was declared. Economic inequality and political instability are some of many important challenges that still remain. Germany encourages all member states to use this conference to debate and to find equitable solutions to the matters at hand. Decolonization is not about blame, it is about building a fairer future together.
Thank you, Delegate of Germany. Delegation of Greece, you now have the floor.
Honorable Chairs, respected delegates, Greece strongly believes that decolonization is a vital step towards justice and self-determination for all nations. Greece has experienced its own struggle for independence in the past and understands how important it is for nations to control their own future. We recognize that decolonization promotes stability, peace, and respect for cultural identities. As a country that values democracy and independence, Greece encourages all nations to work together and ensure a fair and peaceful process of decolonization worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Greece. Delegation of
Haiti.
Haiti, you now have the floor.
Honorable Secretariat, fellow delegates, and esteemed guests, we are concerned about Haitian development due to the legacy of French colonial power over our suffering nation. In 1838, we were forced to start paying staggering reparations of 90 million francs, which now equates to 12.5 billion US dollars. Furthermore, 16 years ago, in 2010, a catastrophic magnitude 7 earthquake devastated our nation, displacing 1.5 million innocent Haitians, of which some are still recovering to this day. How is the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, with a GDP per capita of just 2,000 US dollars, expected to deal with such destructive events? The simple answer is that we cannot. The international community must help. Colonial power can lead to extreme political instability. For example, the French rule of Haiti culminated in the 2019 crisis. In the past, we have helped suffering nations like the Dominican Republic to break free. We urge all other delegations to stand with Haiti. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next opening speeches will be coming from India, followed by apologies. So.
Thank you, delegates, and thank you, ambassadors. We will now be using those rights of reply. Are there any delegates wishing to make use of their own right of reply? Please raise your placards now. Delegation of the United Kingdom, current United Kingdom, you now have the floor. Do you not have a mic in front of you? He doesn't have.
Thank you for the floor. How can the ambassador of China speak of decolonization when their Belt and Road Initiative has produced extensive debt dependency and has led to strategic asset forfeiture by China in previously colonized countries, which effectively resembles modern neocolonialism? Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any more rights of reply? Delegation of Australia of 1956, you now have the floor.
How can the delegation of China be so for sovereignty if they can't respect the sovereignty of Taiwan themselves?
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any more rights of reply? Delegation of Haiti, you've been recognized.
France, you speak of economic stability, yet you have left us in ruins. How will you pay reparations for this damage?
Thank you, delegates. Ambassadors, please take your seats. Please approach the podium.
Line up alphabetically.
you're done, please stand in the shadows so that you're not blocking the view. When you're done, please stand in the shadows and also wait over there in the shadows up at the top so you don't block the camera. Yeah. And line up alphabetically if possible.
Honorable Secretariat, distinguished chairs, fellow delegates, and guests. As the Ambassador of India, we are honored to be here today to address the topic of decolonization, a topic deeply rooted in our country's history. When India became an independent nation in 1947, it was a monumental triumph for our people. Our path, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha, showed that decolonization can work through peaceful resistance, even amid the tragedy of the partition, which resulted in over 1 million deaths and millions more displaced. Today, India advocates strongly for continued global decolonization efforts in hopes of seeing non-self-governing territories regain full control back over their own land. While colonization and its reversal are a very long and hard process that takes decades, it is one that must be taken because true independence means breaking every chain, political, economic, and cultural, that still binds us to colonial power. Thank you.
Thank you, India. Delegate of Iran, you now have the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Secretary General, distinguished chairs and delegates. More than 80% of the world's land area have at some point been controlled by European imperial powers. Nowadays, they cover less than a tenth of that. This might make you believe that colonialism is a thing of the past, this unbelievable concentration of power, a bad dream from a distant age. But you would be wrong. Western countries, led by the new global hegemon of the United States, continue to oppress the rest of the world, be it through pressuring countries to let Western companies exploit their natural resources, be it through economic sanctions, or even just bleak and brutal military force. But the global power structures are changing, and the West is starting to decay from the inside. In this moment, we urge all countries to join us in our struggle, and inshallah, with God's help, we will create a more just and faithful future. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate of Iran. Japan, you now have the floor.
Esteemed Secretary, Honourable Chairs, distinguished delegates. We must look into the past to learn from the lessons of history and ensure that we do not stray from the path to the peace and prosperity of human society in the future. With these words, our former Prime Minister, Murayama, back in 1995, acknowledged that Japan's post-colonial rule and aggression caused tremendous damage and suffering, and this acknowledgement remains central to our position today. We believe modern decolonization must also address economic dependency and ensure that all nations can develop freely and sustainably, especially today where many post-colonial states suffer under the consequences of climate change. To close with Murayama's words, it is said that one can rely on good faith. So let us all make good faith the foundation of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Mexico, you now have the floor.
Dear Mr. President, honorable chairs, fellow delegates and esteemed guests, the delegation of Mexico speaks today with strong support of significant, fair and peaceful decolonization across the world. Mexico has first-hand experience. For 3 centuries, our nation lived under colonial rule and suffered from the political, economic and cultural domination of a foreign power. Our journey to independence serves as a reminder that an inherent right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination for all peoples is universal and cannot be suppressed. Mexico firmly believes that decolonization should not merely be a political process of changing flags or governments. It must be social, economic, and cultural as well, allowing peoples to control their resources, protect their heritage, and shape their own futures. At the same time, Mexico emphasizes the importance of including indigenous voices into any decolonization process and decision-making. We call upon all member states to engage in constructive and respectful dialogue, keep sovereignty, and work together toward fair, peaceful, and lasting solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Namibia.
Honorable Speaker and delegates, colonization is not merely a chapter in our history. For the Republic of Namibia, it remains a living reality. The political independence we achieved in 1990 does not automatically erase injustice and inequality. So today, all formerly colonized countries stand here together to ask, when does political independence truly become justice? To achieve this, colonial powers cannot simply work through their crimes in the past. Instead, they have the duty to support their former colonies in the present and in the future. We, as a delegation of Namibia, demand strong support from Germany that colonized our nation from 1884 until 1915. During that time, they did not just exploit our natural resources, but also killed over 100,000 Namibians during the genocide of the Herero in Nama. With green hydrogen being the future of Namibia's economy, they must support this through funding, technical, and infrastructural development. It is about investing into our future and not being stuck in the past to achieve actual progress through genuine partnerships and not dependency. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate of Mexico. Delegate of Israel, you now have the floor.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the State of Israel takes the floor with a profound awareness of history and its enduring consequences. Decolonization is not solely a matter of the past. It remains an urgent issue for member states confronting the legacies of oppression, displacement, and conflict. Our national experience, shaped by exile and centuries of persecution culminating in the Holocaust, has given us a deep understanding of the consequences of injustice and denial. This history informs our firm belief that decolonization processes must be undertaken in a responsible, balanced approach grounded in respect for the rights and dignity of all peoples. In this regard, we underscore that decolonization must not serve as a platform for division or unilateral action. Efforts in this domain should contribute to stability, foster constructive dialogue, and fully respect the sovereignty and security of all states concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors. If there are any delegates wishing to make use of a right of reply, please raise your placard now. Delegate of the United States, 1956, followed by the delegation of the Russian Federation, followed by the delegation of Egypt, 1956, followed by the delegation of Zambia, in that order.
So our right of reply would like to address Iran. So how can Iran frame themselves as a power supporting decolonization if they actively support terrorist militias across the Middle East?
Who was the next delegate?
Sorry. How can the delegate of Israel talk about peaceful means of decolonization? Does peaceful mean blowing up children, blowing up hospitals, and ethnically cleansing people from their homeland?
Where was the next right of reply? It was over here in this section.
How can the delegate of Israel speak of decolonization, displacement, and conflict when they have attacked all of its Arab neighbors and oppressed the Palestinian people since the founding of its state?
You gotta click the on button.
Thank you. So the delegation of Japan speaks very boldly about decolonization such, and it's quite ambiguous for a culture that refuses to take accountability for their actions in China.
Thank you, delegates. Ambassadors, please take your seats.
The next opening speeches will be coming from the delegations of Pakistan, Palestine, Peru, Poland, Russian Federation, and Sierra Leone. Ambassadors, please approach the podium. Delegation of Pakistan, you now have the floor.
Honorable chairs, distinguished delegates, Pakistan is often talked about but rarely truly listened to. Too often our history is reduced to a single moment of independence, as if colonialism simply ended and its consequences disappeared. For Pakistan, decolonization was not a clean break. It was the beginning of new challenges. The delegation of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan is honored to participate in this conference and appreciates the opportunity to contribute to this important discussion. Pakistan is a diverse country with many cultures, languages, and perspectives, shaped by history and resilience. This diversity has taught Pakistan how deeply the past continues to influence the present, and why equal participation in international systems cannot be taken for granted. When discussing decolonization, Pakistan believes we must not only reflect on our history, but also question current structures that continues to favor some states of another. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Palestine, you are up next.
Honorable Deputy Secretary Generals, distinguished guests, fellow delegates. For many, decolonization is history. For Palestinians, it is our present reality. We continue to live under occupation, displacement, and inequality, and our struggle reminds the world that the promise of self-determination is still unfulfilled for millions. Decolonization for us is not about replacing one domination with another. It is about ending systems of control, recognizing historical injustice, and building a future where everyone who lives in our land can enjoy freedom, dignity, and equal rights. As we begin BERMUN, we invite you to see decolonization not as a distant topic, but as a shared responsibility, and to make this conference a space where we listen to marginalized voices, confront uncomfortable truth, question inherited power structures, and practice the solidarity that we so often write to our resolutions, so that we may imagine a world where no person must fight simply to exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Peru, you have the floor.
Honorable Speaker and delegates, the Republic of Peru stands before this assembly as a nation whose history has been deeply shaped by colonialism. For centuries, our land, labor and resources were extracted to serve foreign interests, while our indigenous peoples were silenced and marginalized. Colonialization, therefore, is not a concept of the past for Peru. It's an ongoing responsibility. Peru recognizes the knowledge of our indigenous communities whose sustainable relationship with nature long predates colonial rule. Their wisdom must guide global development, not be exploited or ignored. We call upon the international community to move beyond symbolic gestures and support fair trade, cultural self-determination, and economic justice. True decolonization requires equal partnerships, not dependency, cooperation, not domination. Peru remains committed to working with all member states to build a future where historical injustices are addressed and every nation can shape its own path with sovereignty and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Poland, you have the floor.
"40 years ago, Poland lived under communism, a system that promised equality, yet delivered shared poverty, economic stagnation, and total dependence on Moscow. Inequality was not eliminated, opportunity was. Then we chose a different path. Today, we're one of Europe's fastest growing economies with one of the lowest inequality levels in the OECD. Prosperity does not grow from central control, it grows from strong institutions, open markets, and accountable governance. When we speak of decolonization, we must speak of economic sovereignty, the ability of a nation to compete, innovate, and govern free from corruption and structural dependency. Because poverty is not defeated by dividing wealth that does not exist. It is defeated by creating wealth where there was none. Colonial chains were once made of iron. Today they are made of corruption, weak institutions, and economic isolation. Break those chains and inequality falls with them. Poland did, and you can too. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of the Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Distinguished chairs, esteemed delegates, Russian Federation welcomes the theme of BERMUN 2026, decolonizing. It's not just a historical look back, it's about the future. It's about moving away from a world of standardized solutions and towards a genuine multipolarity where every culture has a seat at the table. However, the Russian Federation finds it fascinating to hear so many delegations speak passionately about decolonization while still holding on to their favorite overseas territory or lecturing the rest of us on how to run our own borders. We appreciate the enthusiasms, however, some countries require far more work in this regard than others. It's hard to take a lecture on liberty from those who still seem to miss the days of the empire. In this spirit, we advocate for three main things. True equality, moving past the era where a few nations act as the world's administrators. Pragmatic partnerships, focusing on energy security and trade that respects national borders rather than trying to erase them. Cultural sovereignty, acknowledging that there is not simply a one-size-fits-all model for a successful state. We aren't here to be difficult, get in anyone's way, or cause problems. We're here to be realistic. Russia invites all delegations to replace the lectures with a real dialogue. Let's build a global order that looks less like a monologue and more like a conversation between equals.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Sierra Leone. You have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, and fellow guests. The delegation of Sierra Leone firmly believes that the inequalities and injustices facing many African nations today cannot be separated from the legacy of colonialism. While political independence marked an important step towards self-determination, decolonization remains incomplete when economic dependency, unequal development, and social challenges persist. Sierra Leone strongly emphasizes the need for international cooperation based on partnership rather than charity. This includes fair trade systems, debt relief, and investment in education and infrastructure. Through shared responsibilities and mutual respect, this conference has the opportunity to move beyond history and work towards a more just and equitable global future. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors. If there are any delegates wishing to make use of a right of reply, please raise your placard now. Delegation of Israel, 1956, followed by the delegation of the Netherlands.
This is coming from the delegation of Israel. How can the delegation of Palestine talk about enjoyment of freedom and peace when it abused Israeli humanitarian aid for weaponry systems and other military equipment?
The Russian Federation talked about countries missing the age of the empire, but isn't the Russian Federation proving with certain actions that they actually miss the age of the UdSSR?
Thank you, delegates. Ambassadors, please take your seats.
Delegates, we ask that after you have given your rights of reply, you turn off the mic again, seeing as it will cause some technical problems on our side. Thank you.
On that note, the next opening speeches will be coming from South Africa, Turkey, USA, Ukraine, and United Kingdom, and Algeria. Please line up at the podium. Delegate of South Africa, you now have the floor.
Honorable Chair and delegates, 30% of the world's raw materials are located on the territory of Southern Africa, and yet millions of its population live in poverty. This is not a tragic coincidence. This is colonial legacy. This figure is proof that Africa's resources continue to be controlled by external actors, which highlights the external control of its economic structure. Genuine decolonization must therefore include regaining control over these resources. Even after South Africa's freedom in 1994, post-colonial foreign influence continued to weaken the economy and institutions and delay independent development. Therefore, we call upon member states to take concrete action to dismantle structural inequalities and support the world's path towards economic and political decolonization. 30% of the world's raw material should also mean 30% of the world's opportunity for the population of Southern Africa. We look forward to work with you on these issues in the committees. Thank you, Honourable Chair and fellow delegates.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Turkey, you now have the floor.
Honourable Secretariat, distinguished delegates, esteemed guests. A century ago, during the War of Independence, Turkey secured its national sovereignty through determination and unity. Our struggle sent a clear message. Sovereignty is not granted, it requires action. This principle lies at the heart of the United Nations and its declaration on granting independence to colonial countries and peoples. Yet, for many countries, decolonization remains unfinished. Today, true independence means more than a flag. It requires strong institutions, economic fairness, and equal representation in global decision-making, and respectful diplomatic dialogue. Turkey reaffirms its commitment to international law, peaceful dialogue, and a just international order where all nations are regarded equal. Let us strive to make the promise of decolonization a lasting reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of the USA, you now have the floor.
Delegates, esteemed judges, honorable chairs, organizers, and guests. As a nation born from the first act of decolonization, the United States remains a champion, an adamant supporter of the right of all peoples to self-determination. And so it is with dismay that we have watched in these past years this conference morph not into the ideal of collaboration, but into a polarized forum whose effectiveness has been drastically reduced by certain states. States who push unfounded anti-West propaganda to further their own agendas. These nations will recognize themselves, these chairwarmers. However, our disappointment stems from a sense of deep attachment and historical commitment to this body. Ever since its foundation in 1945, in the heart of California, San Francisco, the United States has been the architect and the most vital donor of the UN, thereby allowing each and every one of the delegates here present to speak freely. What we strive for is humanitarian and economic autonomy, focusing on building local capacity so that nations no longer need to depend on the UN,
Delegate, please come to your closing remarks.
on other nations, or on aid. That is the ultimate form of decolonization. God bless America.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of the United Kingdom, you now have the floor.
Honorable President and Secretary Generals, honorable chairs, esteemed delegates, the delegation of the United Kingdom is here today, guided by the great principles of our long-standing democratic traditions. Decolonize is a word that we in the UK are familiar with. From a historical standpoint, we held significant formal control or presence in at least 94 present-day countries. Whilst we are criticized for our colonial past, one must also acknowledge the enormous improvements we have made to these former colonies in relation to establishing legal systems, democratic institutions, education, and of course, infrastructure. Our commitment to decolonization is unwavering and can be seen in the Commonwealth of Nations, an organization which is dedicated to supporting countries in economic, political, and cultural independence to this day. In addition, the UK International Aid Fund focuses on supporting systems, local development, and providing expertise. The partnership serves not only to respect the autonomy of those involved, but also leads to mutually beneficial relationships. If that is what the banner theme implies, then we, the United Kingdom are fully engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Ukraine, you now have the floor.
Honorable student officers and secretariats, fellow delegates and distinguished guests, it gives me great pleasure to have been given this opportunity to represent Ukraine at Berlin Model United Nations in February of 2026. This conference topic is decolonization, a subject that remains highly relevant today. Although Ukraine has never been colonized in the strict sense of the word, our nation understands and shares in the immense suffering caused by foreign occupation. In just a few days, the world will mark 4 years since the start of Russia's unprovoked full-scale invasion against Ukraine. This war of aggression has brought great suffering to the people of Ukraine. In order to heal the wounds of colonization, we as a community of nations need to engage with one another on the basis of international law and with mutual respect for the territorial integrity of other states. Let us work together towards this goal. Thank you and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Algeria, you now have the floor.
Thank you, delegates, honored chair, esteemed guests, honored delegates. Well, we would like to start this speech by greeting our friends of the African Union and the Arab League, whose steadfast commitment to decolonization is pioneering our global effort. However, it seems that this global effort is under threat. We can look at any continent of the world and we see a lot of dangers that can harm our development, peaceful coexistence. I'm looking at Venezuela in the past couple weeks. They have been in the news. I can also look at Israel and Palestine, the tensions in Ukraine and Iran. These potential threats are actively harming and will harm our development for peace, our commitment to decolonization, if we don't bridge the gap and overcome formal or informal hostilities between nations. We as the United Nations are supposed to be here, committed, allied, unified. And this is our effort here today in the upcoming 3 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ambassadors. If there are any delegates wishing to make use of a right of reply, please raise your placards now. Delegation of China and Nigeria, you have been recognized.
Thank you. How can the USA speak of polarization when it itself is drawing out of international bodies? The USA is prohibiting global action through trade coercion and self-interest.
How can the delegation of the UK talk about positive effects of their colonization when leaving Nigeria in chaos, poverty, and dependency to this day?
Thank you, delegates. Ambassadors, please take your seats.
The final opening speeches will come from Belgium, Canada, and Chile. Ambassadors, please approach the podium. Delegate of Belgium, you have the floor.
Dear Secretariat, honorable delegates, and distinguished delegates, the Kingdom of Belgium is honored to address this committee today. The theme of decolonization is not confined to the past. It remains deeply rooted in the political structures, economic systems, and social inequalities that continue to shape our world today. From resolutions debated within the United Nations to powerful movements across the world, the call for true self-determination and equitable development, diplomacy, and meaningful cooperation between nations. Let us approach this conference not as competitors, but as representatives of a shared global issue.
May our debates be fruitful, our resolutions meaningful, and our cooperation unwavering. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Canada, you have the floor.
Honourable Chair, esteemed delegates, and distinguished guests. As the representative of Canada, I am honoured to address you today on the vital issue of decolonisation. Decolonisation is a pressing global challenge that demands our collective attention. The legacies of colonialism continue to affect nations worldwide, and we must confront these injustices. Canada acknowledges the impacts of colonialism on Indigenous people and believes that true reconciliation requires action. As we engage in discussions, let us remember to honour the voices of marginalised communities and to understand their experiences. Together, we can create solutions that respect the rights and dignity of all peoples. Let us commit to a future where every nation thrives, free from the shadow of colonialism. Together, we can make meaningful strides towards justice. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussions.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate of Chile, you have the floor.
Honourable speakers, esteemed delegates, dear guests. As a multi-ethnic country that has been a victim of colonialism in the past, Chile is, till this day, suffering the consequences of decisions made centuries ago by a state that isn't even our own. When different ethnic groups live within the same borders, it is undoubtedly that conflicts of interest will occur, making it impossible to take all minority interests into account. In our country, the dissatisfaction of minorities has resulted in terrorist actions that have killed our soldiers and citizens of this country. We are not the ones to blame. These issues are rooted in colonialism and its effects. Now, our question is, what have you, the colonial powers, done to help colonized states overcome the challenges that you have left them with? So as a delegate of Chile, I'm standing before you today, urging you to understand that the question of decolonization is not one to be addressed by only certain states, but all states, especially the ones who are at fault of these conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors. If there are any delegates wishing to make use of a right of reply, please raise your placard now. This will be coming from Slovakia, followed by Sierra Leone. Oh, sorry.
Canada has mentioned a lot about going against decolonization, but do they recognize that the many tribes within Quebec, specifically in Canada, are facing a lot of inequality, exploitation, and colonization themselves, even within the country borders?
Belgium claims they want to cooperate with all nations, but they themselves became wealthy by exploiting African resources for decades. Why has your government still not paid direct financial reparations to nations you stole from?
Thank you, delegates. Ambassadors, please take your seats.
Before we adjourn, we have a few brief but very important announcements. If you would like to stay updated with what is happening during the BERMUN conference, the press team will report its work on the BERMUN website under BERMUN.de. You can also access this page by clicking on the News section on the BERMUN platform. The press team also has an Instagram account called BERMUN.press. The press team will also be reporting about our guest speaker event that will take place tomorrow with Namibian Ambassador Jarabim Shanika. His Excellency is a senior Namibian diplomat and international relations expert.
BERMUN merch, including mugs, tote bags, stickers, and a limited number of hoodies will be available after committee sessions each day in the ground floor foyer. Additionally, please bring a reusable water bottle to this conference. We will have large containers of water to refill them. Please do not take more than one drink from the refrigerators in the hallway daily. This way, we can ensure that everyone is able to get a drink. We would also like to encourage you to please finish your bottles and return them to the drink stations when empty.
We would also like you to remind you to make sure that we leave the building even nicer than we found it. Please do not leave any trash lying around and do not eat or drink in the rooms. The only exception is drinking from a closable water bottle. We are incredibly happy to be here in the CAS, and we want to make sure we reciprocate that hospitality.
All participants of BERMUN2, you'll be joining your second committee session in your respective committee rooms tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please arrive by 8:30 and be seated in your committees by 9. I will now read out the room assignments. You can also see these in the BERMUN program on page 5. If you have any questions, the directors and the admin team will be there to help. SOCOM will remain here in the forum. SC will be in room 6, the ICJ in room 7. GA4 will be in the Jakob Kaiser Saal. HSC will be in room 226. ECOSOC will be in House 2 in room 0.39 through 0.41. Joining them in House 2 will be MSMUN in 0.4. As a couple final announcements, please do not take your country placards after the ceremony, as they will be moved into your individual committee rooms. Moreover, we would like to highlight that we've recognized the increasing use of AI in Model United Nations. This has resulted in diminished critical thinking, worsened research skills, and unfair competition. Therefore, as student officers, secretariat, and directors, BERMUN prohibits the use of AI throughout the conference. In addition, we would also ask you to not take the glass bottles from the cafeteria so that they may be recycled. As you leave the forum, please enjoy some music from our former head of press, Tony O'Dani. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.
Have a great evening and see you guys tomorrow.